Today, we're plunging into the profound heart of winter, but we're not starting where you might expect.
No, not at all.
When we talk about winter holidays, the conversation almost always begins and ends with the commercial behemoths. But the material we have today is centered on a tradition that offers a completely different perspective. Yalda.
The ancient Iranian winter solstice observance?
Exactly. And what's so fascinating is that our sources use Yalda not just as a cultural curiosity, but as a core framework, a pure, almost unfiltered response to help us understand the universal human impulse that gave rise to all major winter festivals globally.
That's exactly right. Our mission for you, the listener, is really to move beyond the familiar modern trappings of the holiday season. We are going to be examining how a single shared astronomical event,
The longest night of the year.
the longest night of the year, exactly, how that gives rise to these profoundly diverse cultural expressions. We'll explore how local manifestations are shaped by things like, pre-existing cosmological beliefs, later institutional theology, and social structure.
All while keeping that core human thing.
Yes. All while maintaining that core human yearning for renewal and that inevitable transition from maximum darkness back toward the light.
It's a study in parallel evolution,
Yeah.
essentially. And I think before we can use it as a framework, we have to clearly define our centerpiece.
Yeah.
So what is Yalda, and why does its timing matter so much?
Well, at its absolute foundation, Yalda marks the winter solstice. This is the moment when the northern hemisphere reaches its furthest tilt away from the sun.
Right.
And that results in the shortest period of daylight and, critically, the longest night of the entire year. Culturally, within the Iranian sphere, this night is called Shab-e Yalda, or sometimes Shab-e Sheller.
But it's more than just, a date on the calendar. It's the turning point, correct?
Precisely. It's the astronomical nadir, the lowest point. It marks the maximum point of darkness, and it's immediately followed by the critical turning point toward increasing daylight.
So it's the moment hope returns, astronomically speaking.
It is. It's the moment when the power of the dark is finally seen to recede, and the year begins its slow but certain return to the light. This is not just a seasonal marker for these cultures, it is an annual cosmic drama.
Okay, so that's our foundation, the cosmic drama of the longest night.
And if we start with Yalda, we are accessing a tradition that has functioned for millennia. The fact of the solstice maximum darkness followed by that gradual, hopeful return of light, it's a shared human anchor. It doesn't matter where you stood on the globe, you experienced it, and it required an equally universal cultural response.
It makes complete sense that pre-modern societies, societies whose survival was so intimately linked to agricultural cycles and the severity of winter, they would treat this day with immense reverence and probably, a bit of trepidation.
Oh, absolutely.
It feels like the moment of maximum vulnerability.
It is the ultimate liminal moment. It's poised right between survival and potential failure. And for centuries, within the vast Iranian cultural sphere, which, extends far beyond modern Iran, reaching into Central Asia, Afghanistan, and beyond Yalda, has functioned as this robust cultural marker of renewal, of continuity, and of communal resilience.
It's an observance of enduring significance, then.
Enduring, yes. And it's rooted deep in what we call Iranian cosmological traditions.
I understand that the symbolism, specifically the light and dark symbolism, goes back to Zoroastrianism. Is that correct?
Yes, that's a key point. The concepts underpinning Yalda predate Islam by a very long time, and they link very strongly to the dualistic cosmology of Zoroastrianism, which was the ancient state religion of Persia.
And that's all about the battle between good and evil, light and dark.
In essence, yes. The Zoroastrian worldview centers on this perennial conflict between Ahura Mazda, who is the benevolent creator and the force of light and good, and Ahriman, the destructive spirit of darkness. So, the winter solstice was conceptually aligned with the high point of Ahriman's power, the longest night, and the moment when Ahura Mazda's light begins its slow, triumphant resurgence.
So the act of celebrating the solstice is essentially an act of, participating in the cosmic battle on the side of light.
Absolutely. That's a perfect way to put it. It is a proactive cultural and spiritual affirmation of the ultimate victory of light over darkness. And this deep-seated belief system helps explain why Yalda's primary focus is on surviving the night and greeting the dawn.
Right, you're not just waiting it out, you're actively fighting back symbolically.
You're enduring the temporary ascendancy of chaos and darkness, and you're doing it with the full knowledge that order and light must return.
Which brings us to the core practices. If the purpose is cosmic affirmation and, survival, how does that translate into tangible human action? What do people actually do?
Well, the traditional observance centers entirely on communal gatherings. This reflects the idea that community provides resilience against the cold and the dark.
So strength in numbers.
Exactly. Families and friends come together, often at the home of the oldest family member, the matriarch or patriarch, which signifies respect for continuity and for generational wisdom. The night is then spent consuming very specific foods, and this is where the symbolism becomes incredibly vivid.
I know pomegranates and watermelon are central. I have to ask, why those two fruits, specifically in the dead of winter?
They are powerful symbolic anchors. Pomegranates, with their bright crimson seeds and that profusion of internal structure, they symbolize the redness of dawn.
Ah.
And fertility, the vitality of life that is hidden but sustained even during the cold. But watermelon is even more fascinating.
It seems so out of place.
It is. Traditionally, fresh watermelon symbolizes the heat of summer and the glow of the sun. The fact that families managed to preserve or especially cultivate watermelons until the deep cold of the solstice was itself a demonstration of foresight and abundance.
It was a defiance of winter's scarcity.
A total defiance.
That logistical effort alone, keeping a fresh watermelon until December 21st in ancient or pre-refrigeration times, that makes the act of eating it feel like a profound victory.
It's an edible act of hope. It truly is. But beyond the feasting, the most distinctive traditional practice is the symbolic vigil.
Remaining awake until dawn.
Yes. And this is not just casual socializing. It is a deliberate symbolic act of endurance. By staying awake through the period of maximum darkness, the community demonstrates collective resilience. They're refusing to submit to the night's potential dangers or isolation.
And this vigil is filled with poetry, especially the works of Hafez. Why is poetry so central to this observance? It seems like such an intellectual response to a primal physical event.
Well, the recitation of poetry, known as Fal-e-Hafez, is deeply integral. Hafez, the great 14th century Persian mystic poet, is revered as a voice of spiritual and cultural wisdom. During Yalda, people often open his book of poetry, the Divan, at random.
To seek guidance.
Yes, seeking a divination or reading or some kind of guidance for the year ahead.
So it's a form of collective fortune-telling, but one that's rooted in this incredibly deep literary tradition.
Exactly. It reinforces social bonds through shared cultural activity, it engages the mind, and it honors the cyclical nature of time by consulting the wisdom of the past to look toward the future. It's an intellectual and communal antidote to the physical gloom.
And this whole set of practices, the food, the vigil, the poetry, it collectively stresses endurance and reinforces continuity.
And it anchors the belief that light and community will prevail.
This brings us back to what feels like the crucial distinction the sources emphasize, the non-institutional nature of Yalda. This really is the linchpin of our framework.
This is perhaps the most important concept when we start comparing Yalda to the other major holidays we'll discuss. Yalda operates fundamentally as a cultural and seasonal observance. It is completely decoupled from the formal structures of organized religion.
Meaning no established clergy.
No clergy, no codified doctrine, no central governing body, nothing like that.
So how does a tradition survive for millennia without an institution to defend and propagate it? That seems almost impossible.
Its resilience lies in its flexibility and its deep embeddedness in the social fabric. It doesn't involve theological conversion or formal religious authority. It has persisted through different empires, political upheaval, and changes in state religion, precisely because it is purely a communal response to an astronomical fact.
It's maintained through family practices.
Shared family practices, oral history, and domestic custom, yes.
That's a powerful insight. So the lack of dogma actually makes it more durable than a religious holiday, which might be targeted or suppressed by rival political or theological systems.
It allows Yalda to flow beneath political changes. Think about periods in history where official religious practice was restricted or controlled. Yalda, being a home-based, seasonal, family-oriented custom, was able to maintain its continuity.
Because its focus is on something more fundamental.
Its focus is on the human interaction with time and the cosmos, not loyalty to a specific theological institution. It functions purely as a social and temporal marker, maintained endogenously by the community itself. And that non-institutional purity is what allows us to use it as a baseline for comparison.
Okay, here's where it gets really, really interesting for me. If Yalda is the pure, non-institutional cultural response to the longest night in the Iranian sphere, what were other cultures developing around the exact same time, driven by the exact same astronomical reason?
The universal impulse was undeniable. Every community tied to the land noticed that annual turning point. They all needed a system to recognize the maximum darkness, to ward off whatever they perceived as malevolent forces, and to celebrate that first spark of renewal.
Let's start with Northern Europe, where the sources point heavily toward Yule.
Right. Yule, or Yuletide, was the dominant solstice festival in Germanic and Norse cultures. And unlike the sun-drenched cosmology of ancient Persia, northern populations faced truly existential stakes. For them, winter survival was the ultimate test.
So their traditions would reflect that higher stakes reality.
They did. Yule was intrinsically tied to agricultural cycles. It was often the time animals were slaughtered before the hard frost set in, which provided a temporary, massive feast before the leanest months.
So the feasting was not just a celebration, but a practical necessity and a show of preparedness.
Absolutely. And the symbolic practices mirrored the defiance we see in Yalda, but translated through the local landscape. Yule involved massive communal feasting, drinking, and crucially, the ritualistic burning of the Yule log.
Which wasn't just a small log in the fireplace.
Oh no, the log was typically a massive piece of wood, sometimes an entire tree, that needed to burn continuously for several days.
That fire must have been incredibly important, both practically and symbolically.
It was everything. It symbolized generating warmth, maintaining light, and in a profound mythological sense, it was seen as actually fueling the sun's return.
Sympathetic magic.
A form of it, yes. In Norse cosmology, the sun was being dragged across the sky, a chariot pursued by wolves. The fire ritual was a way for the community to participate, to generate the light and heat needed to ensure the cosmological machine didn't stall.
And Yule was also associated with supernatural activity, right? The wild hunt.
Yes, this was seen as the period of greatest supernatural activity, often led by figures like Odin. The veil between worlds was thin.
That's a significant contrast to Yalda. In Iran, the response to darkness is an intellectual and communal vigil. In the north, the response is a massive physical fire and this mythological awareness of wandering spirits. But the goal...
The goal defying the dark is exactly the same.
Precisely. They're responding to the same cosmic truth with different cultural tools.
Exactly. Now, if Northern Europe focused on physically creating light and warding off the mythological dark, the Roman world, situated further south, was already institutionally worshipping the solar return.
Tell us about the Roman context. We know they had a lot of festivals in that December period.
The Roman context is defined by layered festivals that often blurred together. Chief among them was Saturnalia, which was celebrated in the run-up to the solstice.
Right, the big party.
The big party, exactly. It was a week-long celebration marked by social inversion masters served slaves, gifts were exchanged, and public gambling was permitted. It was a massive civic celebration of continuity and the cyclical nature of time, honoring Saturn, the god of agricultural plenty.
It sounds like a temporary release of social pressure before the new year, a way to blow off steam.
It was a release, but it was strategically placed. But the celebration most directly linked to the solstice moment itself was Dies Natalis Solis Invicti.
The birthday of the unconquered sun.
The birthday of the unconquered sun, celebrated on December 25th. This imperial solar cult was particularly popular under emperors like Aurelian.
Sol Invictus, the unconquered sun. So that's an explicitly solar-focused and, in a sense, an institutionalized form of sun worship.
Absolutely. It was part of the state religion. It was linked directly to the emperor's power and the perpetuity of the empire itself. This festival's emphasis was explicitly on renewal, continuity, and the cyclical movement of time, all through the vehicle of a powerful, state-supported solar deity.
What stands out here, looking at Yalda, Yule, and the Roman festivals, is the synthesis, the common denominator. Despite the differences between Iranian domestic custom, Northern European mythological rites, and Roman civic celebration, the date is the same, and the core purpose is fundamentally identical.
Right, to mark the turning point and affirm the return of life.
Exactly.
That's the overarching lesson of this material. All these traditions reflect shared human responses to seasonal change. They're complex attempts to express ideas of cosmic order and continuity. But the critical difference emerges right here. Yalda remained communal and non-institutional. The Roman celebrations by the 3rd and 4th centuries were already formalized, codified, and woven into the imperial power structure.
And that institutional landscape is what the next great religious movement encountered.
Precisely. This historical and cultural landscape, profoundly populated by these established solstice observances, the communal Yalda, the folkloric Yule, the institutionalized Roman solar cults, This is the environment into which Christianity emerged and expanded.
And that context is absolutely vital for understanding the eventual placement and symbolism of Christmas.
It's everything.
So Christianity, a rapidly growing global religion, didn't enter a clean calendar. The time slot around the solstice was already prime real estate for major cultural holidays.
Prime real estate is the perfect term. It emerged within a world where the cultural momentum around December 25th, thanks primarily to Sol Invictus and Saturnalia, was already immense. And here's the key historical detail that often surprises people.
What's that?
The celebration of Christmas as the birth of Jesus was established several centuries after the formation of the faith.
It wasn't mandated by the early apostles or the earliest leaders of the church.
Not at all. Early Christian communities focused primarily on Easter and the resurrection. The establishment of December 25th appears to have solidified largely in Rome in the mid-4th century CE.
Which was a strategically brilliant placement.
Incredibly so. It positioned the new Christian holiday in direct alignment with, or in competition with, the existing widely practiced winter festivals.
So the institutionalization of the Christian calendar effectively mapped a new, profound theological meaning, the Incarnation, onto an ancient, pre-existing cultural landmark of solar rebirth.
That is the core mechanism of syncretism at work. As Christianity expanded, particularly into the culturally rich pagan spheres of Europe, it systematically absorbed solstice-related symbolism into its theological framework. It provided a powerful, unifying theological narrative that could easily overlay the existing emotional and cultural investment in the darkest time of the year.
Can you give us a concrete example of that overlay? How did that work in practice?
Certainly. The theological idea of Christ as the light of the world, or the Sun of Righteousness, provided a perfect, seamless replacement for the pre-Christian concepts of the sun's rebirth after the solstice.
So instead of worshiping the physical sun,
People were now celebrating the arrival of the divine light. The powerful, familiar seasonal concepts remained, but the object of worship was transformed.
that makes the resulting festival intensely layered, doesn't it? It's not a purely religious holiday. It's a religious observance situated right on top of a seasonal foundation.
It is fundamentally a composite festival. Christmas commemorates the birth narrative, but its timing, coinciding with the post-solstice period, meant it naturally incorporated symbolic elements already present in traditions like Yalda and Yule. Think about the focus on light candles, lamps, the cheer that combats the cold.
These are universal themes of renewal.
Exactly, which the church expertly utilized to ease conversion and assimilation.
And as the observance moved north, those layers just kept accreting, didn't they? It picked up more baggage, so to speak.
Absolutely. As Christianity moved into areas dominated by Germanic and Norse culture, it absorbed regional customs, like the use of evergreen trees and wreaths, which symbolized enduring life through winter, a totally Northern European pagan concept.
And the feasting from Yule.
The feasting traditions of Yule, the gift-giving traditions of Saturnalia, it all got folded in.
It sounds like Christmas wasn't just established. It was synthesized, layered, and hybridized through centuries of strategic positioning and cultural absorption.
That's the most accurate description. The result is a highly accreted festival shaped profoundly by theological narrative, local European folklore, Roman imperial structure, and ultimately the ancient, enduring seasonal symbolism inherited from the very first observances of the solstice.
And this layering contrasts so sharply with Yalda, which, because it lacked that institutional desire for mass conversion or standardization, just remained focused on its original communal core.
Precisely.
Okay, so we have the dates, the rituals, and the historical convergence, but we have to discuss the people. The sources highlight that every major seasonal observant solstice or equinox features specific symbolic figures. These characters aren't just mascots, they personify the moment of transition itself.
They do.
And this is where we see some really striking cultural parallelism.
These figures are essential. They act as the agents of the calendar. They embody change, manage the passage of time, or symbolize the bounty associated with the new season.
So let's return to the Iranian sphere and look at Amun-o-Roz and Haji Firuz. Now, they're traditionally associated with Nowruz, the New Year, and the spring equinox. Why does the source material use these spring figures to parallel our winter solstice discussion?
That's an insightful question, and the answer is crucial. They represent the full cyclical renewal system in Iranian culture. While Yalda marks the cosmic turning point, the return of light Nowruz marks the full seasonal and cultural completion of the cycle.
The official start of spring?
The official start of spring. And structurally, these figures fulfill the exact same function as their winter counterparts globally. They are the ceremonial harbingers of transition and cyclical return.
Perfect. So tell us about Amun-Nowruz.
Amun-Nowruz, or Uncle New Year, is the primary symbolic figure associated with the arrival of the new year. He functions as a profound archetype of cyclical continuity. He is typically portrayed as an elderly figure, suggesting the wisdom and long passage of time, who appears cyclically to bring good fortune.
And his role is the elder, the sage bringing bounty.
Yes, he represents the cyclical return of life and warmth after the long winter passage. He brings gifts and blessings, particularly to children. He remains an enigmatic figure he visits, often unseen, and his arrival signals the moment the old, cold year fully gives way to the new, warm one.
And what about Haji Firuz? He's the more visible one, right? The herald?
Haji Firuz is the lively, visible messenger. He is often seen in public, performing on the streets in the days leading up to Nowruz. He is typically depicted with a soot-covered face and wearing bright red clothing.
So his role is purely performance and announcement.
Purely. Transition and visibility. He is the street messenger moving between the temporal cycles, announcing the imminent renewal through music, dance, and public engagement. He makes the abstract idea of a calendar shift tangible and joyful.
So we have the wise, elderly benefactor Amun-Nowruz and the lively, performing messenger Haji Firuz. It's a complete system for managing the change of season. Now let's look at the Northern European parallels in that Yuletide period.
We see figures embodying very similar functions, but they're often overlaid with a sense of judgment or even darkness that's tied to the harshness of winter. Early Yuletide folklore featured figures, often associated with Odin or the Wild Hunt, who acted as messengers or enforcers during the darkest part of the year.
We see the dualism in figures like Knecht Ruprecht or Krampus, figures that accompany the saintly figures in Central European folklore. They embody the stick and the carrot, the punishment and the reward.
Exactly. They represent the high stakes of winter survival. Good children receive blessings. Bad children, perhaps, don't survive the famine or the cold, metaphorically speaking. It's a manifestation of the primal anxiety attached to the deepest part of the year.
But they're still agents of temporal shift.
They are. These are figures tied to transition, darkness, and performance, structurally mirroring the need for an agent to manage that shift.
Which brings us to the figure that completely dominates the global conversation today. The complex, highly composite, and thoroughly secularized evolution of Santa Claus.
Santa Claus is the ultimate study in cultural accretion and modern reinvention. The figure we recognize globally was developed through the convergence of multiple traditions, resulting in an archetype that is global in reach but so deeply layered in history.
Okay, let's break down those layers. Where does it start?
Well, the foundation starts with St. Nicholas, the 4th century bishop of Myra. He provides the original Christian charitable foundation, the idea of a gift giver motivated by piety and generosity. This is the moral and religious starting point.
But the flying sleighs and the nocturnal travel, that's pure Northern European folklore, isn't it? That doesn't come from a bishop in Turkey.
Not at all. That's where the Dutch Sinterklaas, a figure still very close to Nicholas, begins to absorb characteristics from Northern European winter folklore. Things like long-distance travel, the ability to traverse winter terrain, and a general supernatural presence tied to the cold season. This blending provides the necessary mythological vehicle for him to operate.
And yet, despite the Christian and folkloric layers, the structural similarity to the Iranian figures remains striking.
It's fascinating, isn't it? The functional parallelism. Santa shares key features with Amun-Nowruz. The cyclical appearance tied to a calendrical turning point, symbolic clothing, the gift-giving, and representing the return of hope and bounty.
He is an agent of transition.
He is. However, Santa's story takes a very sharp turn in the 19th and 20th centuries that the Iranian figures largely avoided.
Standardization and commercialization.
The Great Divergence, yes.
So how did this purely seasonal figure become a global retail icon?
It began with literature and media standardization, mostly in the United States. In 1823, you have Clement Clarke Moore's poem, A Visit from St. Nicholas's.
It was the night before Christmas.
Exactly. And that poem solidified so many of the modern elements. the sleigh, the reindeer, the chimney entry. This literary move pulled Santa away from his regional specificity and started creating a universal
And
version.
a visual standardization. That's where commerce stepped in, I imagine.
It is. Thomas Nast, the 19th century cartoonist, further standardized the visual look, the jovial face, the fur trimming. But the most important step was in the 1930s when an artist named Haddon Sundblom, working for the Coca-Cola Company.
Ah, the famous Coke ads.
The very same. He solidified the modern image, the specific red suit, the robust human size, the cheerful disposition. This highly effective marketing campaign standardized the visual archetype globally.
So commercialization required a figure that was secular enough to sell products, standardized enough to be globally recognizable, and generalized enough to appeal across cultures.
Precisely. Santa became a secular icon of consumerism. And while Amu Nowruz and Haji Firuz remained tied to the communal cultural act of marking the calendar and celebrating time, Santa was transformed into an agent of the modern market, which fundamentally changed his seasonal function.
Okay, so if we connect this all back to our initial framework, the material provides a really stark contrast between the current state of these traditions. It highlights the two very different paths a solstice observance can take thousands of years later.
It does. You have the path of the institutionalized, composite, and now commercialized festival on one hand.
And on the other, the path of the enduring, communal, self-sustained practice.
Let's first look at the institutionalized form, Christmas. In the modern context, it has achieved massive global reach. It has expanded far, far beyond its original religious communities. It is a dominant global cultural and economic force.
Its visibility is overwhelming. I mean, it's supported by media, retail, and public infrastructure across nearly every Western-aligned nation.
And its modern secular manifestation often emphasizes decoration, generalized themes of goodwill, and above all, the massive engine of gift exchange. It is highly commercialized, driving significant portions of the global economy, from logistics to advertising, and it's deeply institutionalized, supported by global media and government holiday scheduling. Yalda has maintained its focus on the immediate, communal, and seasonal act of marking time. It continues to operate as a cultural observance tied directly to the solstice. It remains focused almost entirely on family gathering, oral tradition, and seasonal symbolism.
The sharing of food and the staying awake to greet the dawn.
Yes. Its resilience is found in its non-profitability, its refusal to be standardized for mass consumption.
So using Yalda as the pure framework really highlights the degree to which Christmas was strategically adapted. The decision to absorb, standardize, and then aggressively commercialize Christmas fundamentally changed its character and made it a global economic product.
It perfectly illustrates the dichotomy. The same astronomical rhythm, the longest night, results in these incredibly diverse cultural expressions. Yalda retains its structure as a self-sustaining, non-institutional seasonal practice, valuing continuity, presence, and communal endurance. Christmas, by contrast, became a highly layered, institutionalized, and globally commercialized event, fulfilling a completely different set of economic and social functions in the modern world.
Both are responses to time, but one requires purchase and the other requires presence.
That's a beautiful way to summarize it.
We've had a deep and, I think, a fascinating journey here. We traced a single shared astronomical moment, the solstice, through thousands of years of human cultural response. We moved from the philosophical endurance and communal poetry of Iranian tradition through the strategic placement of Christmas over Roman solar cults, right up to the modern, globally recognized, commercialized Santa Claus.
And the overarching takeaway, and the reason these traditions endure in any form, is that solstice observances are fundamentally about continuity. They're about the deep human need to mark time. They provide a cultural mechanism for enduring the darkness and celebrating the certainty of renewal.
They confirm that time is cyclical, not just a straight line to the end.
Exactly.
Thank you for sharing the sources that allowed us to undertake this deep dive. The cultural insights contained here, particularly that clear distinction between institutional and communal survival, are genuinely revealing.
And this raises an important question for you to consider, the listener, as you observe the coming seasonal shift. Given the global reach and economic power of commercial culture today, what is the long-term fate and cultural health of non-institutional seasonal practices like Yalda?
Can they survive?
And what is ultimately lost in terms of historical connection, generational continuity, and maybe spiritual depth when a communal observance rooted purely in time and presence becomes wholly defined by commerce and consumption? Something for you to mull or explore on your own as the seasons turn.